this lecture, we are going to discuss what is known as the supply chain. And we are going to focus on some of the carbon materials, some representative examples we are going to take. Okay. So many of you might be aware of what is a supply chain. Maybe those from engineering backgrounds definitely learned about supply chain management and also operations research during their bachelor's degree. But anyway, I'm going to give a brief overview and sort of to remind you, what do you need to do when you want to move from manufacturing to production? Okay, so what is supply chain by definition? Supply chain basically involves all these steps, starting from, let's say, the production of or the procurement of your raw materials, all the way to, providing the final product to your customer and even customer service at times. So this entire chain is known as the supply chain. Okay. Now, although it is called a chain, it is actually not a chain when you think of, what do you think? So think in terms of carbon materials. So chain is carbine. But supply chain is not really as simple as that. It's not really a chain, it's a network, because everything is connected to everything. There are, you do not have one individual company in the entire, business network. Often you have multiple companies, multiple producers, and also multiple buyers. They are connected to each other. These are the things that you need to think of, again, when you want to move from, your scientific research to actually providing a product to the customer. And even if you're a researcher, often you may have to, you will have some deliverables for the industries. So you basically need to make something that can be sold. So in that case, it's very important for you. Maybe there is a certain scientific process and you're very happy about your process, but it's not scalable, or it's not cost effective. Maybe you can make some very excellent devices, but they are too expensive. So all of these things together you need to think of, and if you want to, again, make whatever you're making, but for the for the general public, in that case, supply chain becomes very important. So again, this is kind of a set of all of these steps involved in in the production of your material, plus not just the production, but getting the raw material from somewhere and supplying the final product to someone. Okay, so this is your supply chain. What does it actually mean? You know that there is certain demand for some materials, and when there is a demand, you supply that material. Sometimes there is more supply, sometimes there is more demand, and this optimization of supply and demand is what is very important for anybody to have a successful business. Okay. So supply chain basically is the interface between the supply and demand. Okay, so you need to definitely understand the demand first. So if you want to start a business, first you need to understand which type of carbon material, okay, and why should you produce that. Maybe there is no demand for that material, or the demand is there but only for research purposes, so you don't really need several kilograms of graphene, for example, because graphene, even if you have 100 grams of graphene, that can be used for a lot of purposes. If you're making devices, say, and you're making devices with single or few flakes of graphene, in that case, how many flakes do you need? Maybe 100 grams of graphene will be sufficient for some research lab for a good few years. So in that case, how much production is actually required? What are the quantities that are required? So, and accordingly, what is the cost that is associated with it? If you want to make now some other carbon material, let's say carbon black, yes, the demand is very high because carbon black is required as a reinforcement material for tire industry. The demand is definitely high, but in that case, you may have to think that there are already a lot of companies who are making it, a lot of manufacturers. So you do have various players in the market. You may have to compete with really major players, and you may not be able to compete with them. You may not, because also when the production quantities increase, the overall cost generally decreases. So if you're making something in smaller quantities, then you're going to probably have very high costs involved, and that is why you may not be able to compete with the companies, larger companies who are producing several thousands of tons of carbon black. So these are the things that you need to think of, and this is where you move from research to business. Okay, so yeah, supply chain is a network, and supply chain involves multiple things. So with the examples it will become more clear, but let me tell you what are our goals. So minimize the production time and production cost. That is something you understand, because obviously if you have if you can produce something very fast, that is good, and if you can produce something at a low cost, especially lower cost than let's say your competitors, in that case definitely you are at an advantage. Okay, you also would like to have good production efficiency. And what you should also have, this is a very important factor in business, is to ensure the quality of your product. If your product is of bad quality, maybe it is cheap and so initially a lot of people buy it, but you will only have this, a peak of your sales. But after that, once people realize that, okay, no, this is, although this carbon material is good, but it does not really perform the task. So in that case, you may not have a good sale, or your business will die out after some time. So ensuring the quality of the product is also very important. Okay, at the end it is the customer satisfaction. So customer satisfaction is something that we don't think of when we are making something, especially when you move from science to business. It's very difficult, because for us what is important is the quality, of course, of what we make. It's also important that we use good manufacturing processes. Good, by good I mean that sometimes you try to use something innovative. You want to basically apply a lot of your skills, a lot of your thought process goes into this, into whatever you're manufacturing. We often tend to not think of the customer. Okay, maybe the customer does not really want a very high quality. Maybe the customer does not really care for 99.9% purity, but the customer probably wants a reasonable cost. If the cost is increasing a lot when you move from 96% purity to 99% purity, let's say, those are the very, those are the steps that require a lot of energy consumption. So this often happens in the case of carbons, because you see, when you're making carbon fibers, or you're making anything that is graphitic, in that case, the last steps of graphitization are the most expensive, most energy consuming steps, because you need to go to temperatures as high as 3000 degrees. And these processes are also relatively very, very slow. Several days, it may take several days to convert a certain set of carbon fibers into graphitic carbon fibers. So the question is, do we need those kind of carbon fibers? What applications require those kind of carbon fibers? What is the fraction of those applications? Because, and how many customers do you have? This is something that you need to understand, because otherwise, why should you make something that nobody is going to buy? Even though it is going to be a very good material, you're going to have a very high modulus carbon fiber. But at the same time, you need to see how many people actually like to buy it, how many applications depend upon it. Okay, so these are some of the aspects that you need to think of. Okay, what are the primary components of supply chain? Again, you will manufacturer is at the center, and then there will be raw material suppliers, and then on the other side you will have warehouses. Warehouses means storage facilities. Of course, to send your material to the warehouse, you will also have some transport companies involved. And these transport companies are also involved when you're getting your raw material to the manufacturing plant. Then you also have people who are involved in selling the material. So, for example, retailers, or some other, even sometimes wholesalers are involved. Nowadays, there are less and less wholesalers involved in businesses. Okay, and a lot of things have also changed since we started doing online business. But for carbon materials, not so much, because carbon materials are often used in several in very large quantities, especially those carbons which we call industrial carbons. So carbon fibers, for example, or preforms of carbon fibers, some of them you could actually buy online, but a lot of them are still shipped in several thousands of kilograms, and that is why we still do not rely on online products. But for some smaller products, some cosmetics, some small things, then a lot of things have changed in the supply chain, right? A lot of steps which used to be there are not there anymore. Okay, but these are some of the primary people involved. What are the people? People, who are the people? So first is your marketing team, your market research team also. Marketing, when we say marketing, that's about selling the product, but marketing team also will do some market research, which basically means the team will tell you whether or not you should make a certain carbon material. What is the demand and what is the predicted demand. They will do some forecasting. They will do some trend projections, and then they will tell you whether or not it is feasible to start the business. There is always definitely some risk involved, but you would like to minimize that risk, right? So all of these teams, in fact, risk analysis team I have not written here. So risk analysis is also not just thinking that, oh, this is risky or not. You actually do a proper mathematical analysis of the risk also. And how do you do mathematical analysis? So all of these steps that I have mentioned here, you must be thinking that these are more general things, right? It depends on whether or not you rely on someone, whether or not you, you will be thinking that these are rather social aspects. Who supplies the good raw material? Whether or not you can trust the person who's selling you or not person, but a company selling you the raw material. But it's not just that. It is much more than that, because you can actually assign mathematical values or numbers to everything that is important to you or unimportant to you. So for example, if there is something which is of very high importance to me, let's say I want to start playing badminton from this weekend onwards. So I have decided that I definitely want to play. I have not played for several months, and now it is very important for me. Okay, but I realize that I don't have, let's say, badminton shoes. In that case, I'd like to buy the shoes. What is most important for me is the time of delivery. I need the shoes now. The color of the shoes is not important to me, but maybe the quality is. But to some extent, what is more important now, the quality or the time? So you can actually assign numbers to all of these things. And then based on these numbers, you can see there are maybe 3 or 4 shoe sellers, and you can compare who fits better, who scores more, and then you will you accordingly buy something from there. So this is valid. This is a very simple example, but this kind of thing is valid also when you're dealing with several different companies, several different suppliers on both sides, procurement and also sending the finalized or finished product. So these are the things that we can actually mathematically evaluate a number of steps that are either a part of the supply chain or influencing the supply chain. And this entire field of study is actually what we call operations research. And operations research is very important. There are also nowadays a lot of software that can perform this kind of analysis, especially when you're dealing with big data. So all of these things are important when you're starting a business or when you're in a business, even when you're joining a company. Okay, so yeah, this is basically what I said, that you can mathematically calculate a number of things, and market research will tell you what is the demand. So there are a few methods, the forecasting, trend projections I have told you already, but there are maybe many other small factors you need to ensure before you do your market research. Okay. Now, supply chain is not really exactly the same for all types of products. So especially when you're making carbon materials, you're often making the material and not the final product. But in some cases, you might also be making the final product. So what is very interesting for our carbon materials, either you can make them in bulk. So now when I was talking about applications previously, then I told you that there are few carbon materials that are used for making structures. Like graphite is, when you're manufacturing graphite, actually before making the graphite, even you give a shape to the precursor itself. So there your structure design, structure manufacturing, as well as material manufacturing are pretty much the same. You do that in the same heat treatment process. Okay. But on the other hand, there are also carbon materials that are rather sold as powders or pellets, like activated carbons. They are not really, so they are not really used for making structures, but still the material manufacturing is important to you. So there are all types of carbon materials. If you're making a small device, you're making a field effect transistor using carbon nanotube. That's also in a way some sort of manufacturing. You can call it fabrication. You can do it in the clean room. but it is some sort of manufacturing, making something, right? And there the nature of your product is completely different. The cost of your product, the raw materials, everything is very different. The requirement of your raw material is also very different. When I say requirement in terms of quantity, so all of these things become important, and that is why you cannot have the same type of supply chain for every product. Even for the same product, sometimes the supply chain may vary depending upon what is your raw material. Again, that is a very interesting thing when it comes to carbon materials. We don't always have the same type of raw material, right? Even for making, say, activated carbon, I'm going to show you the example. You can make activated carbon using different types of raw materials, right? So again, accordingly, your supply chain will change, and it's not always this one single type of supply chain that you need to study. Okay. Yeah, so various parts of the supply chain are often assigned numbers. This is something I've already told you, and this is the entire field is known as the operations research. So now we come already to the carbon materials, right? What is the demand of carbon materials? So I told you that demand and supply are two important things, and our supply chain is connecting the two. Okay, what is the demand of carbon materials? And carbon materials are so many different types of carbon materials. For each one of them, the demand varies. So, okay, what I have done here is I have made a table where I tell you what is, so for some representative carbon materials based on a quick internet search. Okay, so first of all, some carbon materials have lately become very, very important. And you know, one name that comes to your mind whenever you think of industrial carbons is carbon fiber. And not just carbon fibers, carbon fiber reinforced plastics. They are used nowadays in the automobile industry extensively. They are also used in many other applications. So anything that is that should be lightweight and strong, then you could replace metals with carbon fibers in principle. So this is one material which has lately its demand has really gone up in the last few years. And if according to that, if you extrapolate that curve, then you will realize that in the next few years also the demand is going to only go only increase, because see, the demand for a certain material depends upon the related industries. So automobile industry is growing, right? And also people have realized that if you have a lighter material, you require less fuel. So also environmental concerns are pushing these kind of lighter vehicles. You also nowadays have hybrid vehicles and electric vehicles, and for them it is very beneficial to have not just a lightweight car, but also if you can utilize that car for some sort of energy storage. So because our carbon materials are also electrically conductive, electrochemically active, they can potentially also be used for the storage of some sort of energy. So all of these things are actually supporting the carbon fiber industry, and the demand is drastically increasing. So yeah, this is the table that I was talking about. This is based on a quick internet search, and these are approximate numbers from 2018. I found some reports. Okay, so don't hold me accountable if some number does not match. Okay, but just to give you an idea, number one, these are some of the industrial carbon materials, and I have not included nanocarbons because the demand and supply for nanocarbons compared to our industrial carbons is still much low. And even the production. So here I have mentioned the market in India as well as the global market, and that's why all the costs are in US dollars. So in India there is little market compared to the rest of the carbon materials, of carbon nanomaterials. Also globally, that is how it is. Even when it comes to manufacturing, nanomaterials are still much less manufactured, especially in India, because we have environmental concerns related to these nanomaterials. And this should definitely be addressed, okay? Because environmental, any environmental factor is very important to us. If there is some nanomaterial which can cause cancer, or its presence in the air is not good for us, in that case, definitely we should think twice before manufacturing it. Okay, so these are some of the carbon materials. Okay. Now, other bulk industrial carbons, you can see from here, also show increase. in demand. So these are just the numbers of the current market. But even if you project the demand, for example, for graphite, it's not that once we have more advanced carbon materials like carbon fibers and nanomaterials and so on, that does not really mean that the graphite demand has gone low or it has even become saturated or stable. No, the demand for all the carbon materials is increasing. Let me give you an example of carbon black. So carbon black is also very strongly connected to the automobile industry, right? Because that is what we use for reinforcement of rubbers. So more advanced tires are also very important for all the cars. So these materials have also increased demand. They have seen increased demand in the past few years for sure. Okay, so this is you can see it for other carbon materials as well. So the idea is that once the application becomes important, that increases your demand, and that is how then automatically sort of supply increases. Also, for example, if there are more regulations about the cleaning of the industrial wastewater, in that case, what will happen? Now, you will think that this industrial wastewater is not really related to carbon industry, but it is very much related. Activated carbons are the ones that are used for making water filtration columns. So indirectly, if there is a regulation that all the water from all the industries should be completely clean, purified, in that case, that is indirectly influencing the or increasing the demand of activated carbons. Okay. Similarly, even when there are a lot of research interests in a certain material, even that influences the demand. Okay, so if we take the examples of graphene and carbon nanotubes, so these carbon nanomaterials, well, the fact that there has been a lot of research or a lot of research interest at least, that has actually increased the demand relatively compared to bulk industrial materials, still much lower. But if we find an application that can be scaled up and that can be commercialized, a device application of graphene, for example, in that case, the overall demand will suddenly increase. And if we are unable to do that, then maybe this demand will reach a saturation point. So everything is connected. Okay. So the point is that whether you're a researcher or you're working for a company or you want to start a company, it's important for you to understand sometimes even your research might be influenced by the market, market demand and supply. You don't even realize it. In many countries, for example, research is more dependent on industrial funding because the governments are not providing enough funding. So those countries also depend upon, in that case, it's very important for them to understand the market even when they are doing research. So everything is connected. So now let us take some examples. This is the first example. You are the activated carbon manufacturer. Okay, so I assume that now from this course you have learned how to, you even learned about different types of furnaces, and you learned how to make your activated carbon. You also know that this can be actually made from waste materials. So okay, you are the manufacturer. What are you going to do? What are you going to first think of? Okay, I want to start a company, or I have a small company already, let's say. I'm making activated carbon. How do I get my raw materials? Coconut shell, which is one of the most common precursors in India, especially for making activated carbon, because of the fact that it gives you a very high quality activated carbon, and we also have it available in India. Okay, coconut shells I get from some supplier. Okay. Then I also get the seeds of some fruits, let's say dates, the khajur. So I get the seeds because these are also very good precursors for making activated carbon. So I decide that, okay, I will not just use one type of precursor, but I will make different grades of activated carbon from different precursors. Maybe also different types. I make pellets and I also make powder. Okay, so for different types of activated carbons, I need different raw materials. Say there is some raw material that also comes out as the waste from some oil making company. Okay, because a lot of oils, let's say even this groundnut oil, when you make, then after that you have a lot of leftovers. So once you extract all the oil from something, then what do you have? You have the basic cellulosic skeleton left over, right? So those cellulosic materials can definitely be converted into porous carbons, activated carbons, and so on. So let's say these three are our suppliers of raw materials. Okay, now I prepare the manufacturing. I do the manufacturing. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of manufacturing that you already have learned so much in this course. Now I have some storage facilities, let's say 2 of them. And these storage facilities then supply it to some distributors. Let's say I have 3 different distributors. Okay. But the warehouse 1 and warehouse 2, both of them do not, they may be supplying the material or sending the material to more than 1 distributor. So let's say the first warehouse is sending it to all 3 distributors, and the second one, let's say, to 2 distributors. Now remember, all of these arrows, they indicate transport of the material, right? The bringing the raw material, sending the finalized product. So you actually strongly depend on the on your transport companies and the network of roads and trains. So this is also very, very important for you. Often this is the most important optimization problem when we want to optimize the transportation, because transportation has 2 things involved in it. One is the time. Time of transportation is very important, especially when you're sending, when you require something which, for example, is very sensitive, or when you're selling something that is very sensitive. Let's say you're selling fresh vegetables and you want to get them from different farmers in different parts of the country. What is most important for you is more than even the cost. What is more important for you is the time. So if the vegetables reach you after 3 days, then they are not fresh anymore, and you are known for selling fresh vegetables. Something like that. That will not happen to carbon materials, right? The freshness doesn't. You can keep it for several days and it's still good. Most of the carbon materials, at least. Okay. So in general, we strongly depend on transportation people. Okay. Now, what do these distributors do? Now they send it to some other companies who are your final customers in this particular case. So let's say there is a water filtration manufacturing company, water filter manufacturing company, and they definitely require activated carbon, and they buy it from you. Maybe distributor 1 and distributor 3 are selling it. Why not distributor 2? Maybe because of the location of the the warehouse, maybe because of the location of the water filter manufacturer. So maybe for some reasons it's these 2 distributors, they sell it to they send it to your manufacturer. Maybe you also, not just to 1 company, you're now selling it, you don't have just 1 customer, you have multiple customers. So your other customer is some cosmetics company. They activated carbon into some soap or something. So that is, they probably do not require as much quantity, but they are also your customers, good customers. Okay, so maybe there are also some of the distributors that are sending it to this cosmetics company. And the third one is a startup started by some ambitious students. Because they thought that this is easy, all I need is coconut shells, so I can just make activated carbons. So let's say this is a group of 3 ambitious students from some IIT or anywhere for that matter, and then these students have started this small company. Again, they do not require very high quantities, but they are also your valued customers. Okay, so now again you see there is a network, and again you depend a lot on the transporters. Now, see, this is where your supply chain sort of ends once you reach your customer. As long as you can satisfy all the demands and you can keep your customers happy, your supply chain as such end. But you also, now for, if you want to make a supply chain for this water filter guy, they also will have some other suppliers. Maybe they are not just buying the activated carbon from you, but from other manufacturers as well. So also maybe your students, the group of students, they are also probably making their own activated carbon. In fact, that's what they thought they're going to do, but they just realized that, then they thought that, okay, why don't we just also make the air purifiers? And then they realized that suddenly the demand has increased so much that they don't have sufficient supply and they don't have the resources to make enough activated carbon, but they do have a lot of demand for their final product. Okay, so in that case they also then started buying it from other companies. So the point is that the chain doesn't really, or the network of supply chain doesn't really end at one point. It's just a part of one big large supply chain. Okay, so that's why I have made this red arrow here. Now these other manufacturers may also supply their activated carbon to some other companies. So it continues. Similarly, when you see that you have these coconut shell suppliers, they are not really, who is your coconut shell supplier? You're not going door to door and collecting coconuts, right? You probably have some organization or some company that is collecting coconut shells or other types of waste materials and segregating the waste, and then probably cleaning it up, making you know, some right size pallets of an optimum size, and that is how they're selling it. You don't just take, you know, individual coconuts. So there is also somebody involved there. So they are also connected, and that company may also be connected to you know, people in some way. Similarly, for your oil making company, for example, has its own supply chain. So the idea is that this is basically what you think of, and every supply chain is a part of a much larger network. Okay, so now you will have other related decisions. Some related decisions, some of them we already discussed. For example, you know, assigning values to things based on the importance. But what you can now, when you're a manufacturer, you will also have to take some other decisions. For example, do you want to make powdered activated carbon? Do you want to make pellets? For which type of carbon you have? More customers. Sometimes you probably want to make just powder. But you have more customers who would like to buy pallets. So in that case, you should be open to a little bit of you know, change in your manufacturing as well. So a little bit of flexibility you should have. Okay, now what I have not discussed is what is known as line balancing, because that is a part of the manufacturing itself. So line balancing, also something that is another related factor, and you need to think of the decision. Line, basically your production line or assembly line, basically means how this describes different steps of manufacturing. So for example, cleaning the coconut shell, and then you know, optimizing their weight, and then placing them in a certain type of furnace. And then you have to also think which type of furnace is good for you. Do you want fluidized bed, for example, or do you want rotary kiln? And that will depend on your application. So again, the furnace, and then you do the packaging of that product, and what kind of packaging you require. So this entire, you may have a certain what is known as production line and assembly line. So these are the things also you will need to pay attention to. Okay, where should your facility be located? So facility, we are talking about both manufacturing plant, and we are also talking about your offices where you're dealing with the, you know, financial matters and so on. You will often see that several manufacturers, they don't have their you know, head office at the same place where they have the manufacturing unit, because of various of course various environmental regulations, and also because how they want to decide how close do they want to be to their raw material supplier, or whether they want to be close to the raw material supplier, or they want to be close to the warehouse, or they want to be close to the final customer. That would depend again upon various factors. That one very important factor is the weight of your raw material or the final product. Do you have wet raw materials or dry raw material? Because if you have wet material, that means it carries a lot of weight. That means you're going to spend a lot on the transportation. So you'd rather stay close to the guy who's selling you the wet raw material, than because your final product is dry. And it's also not important how long will it take during the transport. It's okay if your activated carbon reaches the customer or the warehouse in 2 weeks. But the raw material, if it is sensitive, in that case, or if it is wet, in that case, so these are the decisions that you need to take accordingly and optimize these things. And of course, the cost of transportation and the availability of transportation, these are the things that become important. Okay, and at the end, the restrictions or the regulations of the local government. You know that different states within India or different countries in the world have different regulations for businesses. They can be financial regulations, for example, related to tax payments, or they can be regulations related to the environmental policies. So all of these things you need to factor in, and then you should start your business. So now let us quickly also see one more example. Okay, this example I included because carbon fibers are very important nowadays. So here we'll just quickly go over it. You are the carbon fiber manufacturer. Now, you have learned 2 or 3 techniques of making carbon fibers, right? Let's say you are not making vapor grown fibers. You're not doing CVD because you want very large scale production. So CVD grown fibers are then more expensive in that case. And also they're not very long, so you cannot, it's difficult to make preforms and so on. So you rather decide that, okay, I'll just do electrospinning and melt spinning. But then what precursors do you use? You know that different precursors will give you different types of different modulus of your carbon fiber. You decide that, okay, you'll use both. You'll use PAN, polyacrylonitrile, because that gives you nice and flexible fibers with good tensile strength. And you also decide that, okay, some of the customers want graphitic fibers, high modulus fibers. So then we are also going to use mesophase pitch for that purpose. You may use just mesophase pitch or both isotropic and mesophase pitch. These are your 2 suppliers of raw materials. PAN making, maybe PAN you're buying for the company, for the chemical plant that is producing it. So maybe you're directly buying it from there. But pitch will not be, maybe that pitch is coming from some other petrochemical refinery to these intermediate people, and then from them you buy your pitches. Okay, now what do you have? You have 2 types of fibers, right? You have high modulus fiber, low modulus fiber. You can also call them general purpose fibers. So you now make 2 different types of fibers, but once you make these 2 different types of fibers, this is in terms of modulus we were talking about. Now you also decide that I want to have short fibers as well as long fibers. So okay, short fibers and say braided fibers. So you want to again make short fibers are also used for certain applications. You know that certain types of composites require short fibers rather. So you make both. You also make braided ones. And then there is a third type that you're also providing is what you call research grade carbon fibers. Because for a lot of research purposes, what you require is a very high quality of carbon fiber. Quality could be in terms of modulus, mechanical strength, microstructure, and also in terms of purity. And for many research applications, you need to provide exactly what you are saying, in the sense that even there are very small tolerances when it comes to research grade materials. So you decide that, okay, you're also capable of making some research grade fiber. Okay, so they will have a high cost, so they'll be more expensive, but at the same time the quantities are going to be relatively low. Okay, relatively small. Again, you have this network of who gets which high modulus fiber you are making research grade as well and braided as well, and then you see these arrows here. And here you can see that this may or may not require transportation. That depends on whether or not you are within your facility able to perform the certain process of making short fibers. For example, short fiber, now who buys it? There is some company who's making biomedical implants, bone implants, and they definitely require short fibers. So that they are your customers. Only one customer you have. But for braided fibers, you have more than one customer. Let's say there is some automobile company, they require the preforms, and also you have there is one company that probably only makes the preforms. So you have these CFRP companies, composite making companies, as well as the automobile industry. They are your customers. Okay, and you also decide that even braided fibers you can sell for research purposes if the quality is good enough. So some of it also goes into your research grade. Okay, now the research grade things are directly sold to the customers. That is maybe it is done online even. So that is directly sold to the customer. So this is also one of your strategies. Okay. These biomedical company, the implant people, they are also buying the different types of different sizes of carbon fibers, maybe also from different manufacturers. Again, as you saw in the previous example, that the supply chain thinks this chain itself is not independent, and you could actually potentially draw a supply chain for also these automobile part company, for example. No, they will have their own supply chain which is connected to yours. So this is basically is the supply chain of carbon fibers, and here also these red arrows are showing that it's connected to other companies and so on. Okay, now on your own you can draw a supply chain network for various carbon manufacturing companies, if you or various different carbon materials. So you can do that as an exercise for yourself. And you can also then do further analysis. For example, for each step, the arrows I said show the transportation. You can actually also mention the cost at every step. So then that when you have also cost associated with the supply chain, you call it a value chain sometimes. So you can also do this kind of analysis. You can do what is known as the entire network analysis, which will tell you everything about the time and cost. And as I mentioned, a lot of these things nowadays are done using certain software. But you should know the fundamentals, know how it is done. Okay. Yeah. One thing that I personally recommend that you should always take care of the environmental regulations. See, carbon materials do cause some pollution when we are manufacturing them, but at the same time, it's also not very difficult to ensure that you're not allowing those pollutants to go into the environment. So you can actually have a lot of filtration devices, for example, to catch those carbon particles that are unburnt and then reprocess them. Similarly, for flue gases, so you have these exhaust gases which contain maybe some tar. But you can actually also collect them and then you can reuse that tar or even you can use that tar as some type of oil. You can even use that kind of tar or collection of that pyrolysis oil, for example, for making a lot of for making carbon black. So using it as a raw material for another industry, that can even become your products. One of your byproducts of your company. So the only thing is that you need to think about it and you need to make sure this should be something that you should be conscious, you should be aware of. And then this may even help you increase your profitability. So utilize the waste, and also when it comes to making carbon materials, because a lot of cellulosic waste can yield good carbons, especially the char type of carbons. So in that case, that is something which is highly encouraged, and I hope that there is a good market for waste derived carbon in the future.